Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner on this Thursday, August 10th. Following the U.S. Open, we had our first fully fledged, maxed out, all three divisions, YCCs back to full strength, everything back for the U.S. Open for the first time. And Keith, I have to say, this was the most interesting regular season club tournament that we have had in a long time, a very long time. And really just fun to watch top teams looking like they're in pretty good form for this time of the year, competing hard for a win.
Can't disagree with you. The level of play was high. Teams really felt like they turned it on at the right times. This was what you, I think, hope the regular season actually looks like. Like, teams care and players are in their mode. They're not like in warm up, you know? So it was good to see. YCC was a great palate cleanser too. So altogether, a pretty successful weekend, I'd say. And I don't know that I was necessarily expecting it to be so illustrative of what the club season feels like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't really know why this feels a little different than normal, but it just feels like teams cared more than we've seen. Like, teams were upset when they lost in a way that is not typical of tournaments at this time of year. And that really helps. It helps make everything feel like it matters more. And we got a lot to talk about. So let's get going. I would like to start in the men's division, Keith. Pony gets the win. They defeat Truck Stop 15-13 in the final. It was kind of a back and forth game. Pony had the lead. Pony gave it away. Truck Stop led midway through the second half. But Pony was able to come back late, and they were able to secure a 2-goal win. They were down 11-10 and then went on a 5-2 run to close it out. So not surprising to see Pony as the victors at the end of the day. This is clearly the most talented team on paper, Keith. What did you feel like you saw from this New York team and how we might expect to see them come nationals?
Well, you saw overwhelming talent. I mean, I think that this team looks very much like a work in progress still to me. And, you know, not to say that the other teams aren't going to get better between now and nationals, but you can see where the seams are still showing, I think, right now. So, like, they're still trying to figure out exactly how to deploy these weapons they have who are probably used to being the focal points of offenses. You know, how do you put Jack Williams, Chris Kotcher, Jimmy Mickle, and Ryan Osgar on the same field and get everybody the touches that they're used to or want? And that's not even to talk about. There was no Sean Keegan. Harper Garvey's on this O-line. Like, there's a lot of guys. Sam Little. Like, you can see how Ben Yacht just ends up standing in the end zone with his hand in the air sometimes. There's only one disc, right? So it seemed like they're kind of trying to figure everything out, exactly where everybody needs to be. How do you do all that and maintain this whole like kind of gritty D line? We run 14 deep on defense personality that Pony likes to try and be. But overall, in the end, I think that the fact that they just had a lot of talent carried them a long way.
Which to me is a bad sign for the division. I'll say two things. Okay, two things. Number one, they're not so far out in front that they cannot be beaten. I think that Truck realistically could beat them at nationals. I think that Machine realistically could beat them at nationals. And beyond that, I'm not sure. I mean, TBD on Ring, I guess. And I don't know. I think I'm kind of selling stock on other teams, Keith. I don't see Rhino as a legitimate contender right now. I don't see Revolver. The hype was way too high on this team. They are not there yet. And Bravo, I mean, I don't know, maybe. Bravo had moments, but they ended up getting beaten pretty soundly by Truck 15-11 in semis. So the thing is, Pony's not that far out in front, but they are also a long way away offensively, particularly from where they are going to need to be and where I expect them to be when we get to nationals. So, you look at Truck Stop, for instance, this is a team that has a lot of continuity on its offensive line that looks pretty polished on its offensive line. It has a lot of the same players in rotation that they have on the Breeze that they had last season. Pony, on the other hand, it's not totally new, but you're adding huge impact pieces in Ryan Osgar to the O-line. You don't have Sean Keegan back there. He's hurt. Will he play? We don't know. There's question marks at the handler position in particular. But here's the thing that I think is concerning for the other teams. Number one, Pony's going to get better. Number two, Jimmy Mickle had a terrible final. He had 4 turnovers, including like some turfs, and they still won 15-13. So that's not going to happen from Jimmy Mickle at nationals. So I am having a hard time seeing who is really going to beat them unless Pony never really figures it out. And we have seen that, these super team type teams can sometimes have a hard time gelling, but it would still take a really, 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 really clean performance from a team like Truck in order to knock them off at nationals. But I think Pony looked unpolished and they still won the tournament. And I think that's a very good sign for what they could do. I mean, they have the potential to be a historically great team in the division.
Right. And it's still just potential for right now. I agree with you that I don't yet see the gap. I think that even the teams that you mentioned being out on, catch them while you're on fire. And I think Bravo and Rhino are good enough to snap off a win on Pony. But yeah, I'm generally concerned for the long term because I think that this Pony team has all the pieces to get a lot better. They obviously have a great coaching staff too. So there's they just have so many ways to improve. They have so many paths to being the best team that it's almost like the bar is title. Like just that would be you did well. You did okay. If they go out there and win a title, if they don't go out there and look great, like you're a little bit disappointed, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the expectations are going to be sky high for this program. There's no question. They have an unfair collection of talent. And like your D-line is John Randolph, Conrad Schloer, Jack Williams as kind of your core pieces. I mean, these are literally world games level players. Jack Williams playing D-line for the first time in his life, not just on club, in his life. I don't know if that's going to stick. I get, we'll see. I mean, to me, he's like, to see him stat line in the final, right? Zeros. It's like, is that really what the plan is? Like, I feel like we could end up seeing Jack in the backfield on the O-line. I mean, we've seen him operate extremely effectively in that role for the New York Empire. And he's obviously gotten a lot of touches on ring when he won a title with them. And last year when they sort of underperformed, he was still heavily involved. It's a little weird to have him out there on D. Certainly he'd play any universe point line scenario. But overall, yeah, sure. They're going to have to figure it out a little bit. They're going to have to rejigger some lines. I thought we had some electric games from many players on their roster. I thought we saw awesome stuff from Antoine Davis. Conrad for sure. Mickle had some amazing games. Chris Kotcher was probably their most consistently excellent player on offense. But they are stacked. Jeff Babbitt was quiet for long stretches of this tournament. And that's weird. And then he went off for 3 goals in the final. So once they figure out how to get all these pieces working in the right order, they're going to be overwhelming.
Charlie, it took a lot of energy to not interrupt you. But I can't stand for this. I cannot listen to this, Charlie. Charlie, I cannot have you sit here and list off name after name from New York, pride of New York, and not say Sam Little. What are you doing over there? Are you even a professional?
Sam has been quietly one of the best players on this team for a while, but I have to agree, Keith. I think he has leveled up to a point where he's starting to feel like a top 3 player on the team.
He had a really fantastic tournament. I think probably the only person I would put with Kocher is like the best, most consistent players on the team throughout the weekend. So big shout out to Sam Little. And like when you could be like, oh, Sam Little is our third or eighth best guy or whatever, when Jaron Meeser is your third or fourth best D-line player, like it's dumb.
It's a crazy team.
Now, I know people are probably, especially after the AUDL season, which is not yet over, is if you're tired of hearing about all these New York people, credit to Truck Stop. Like, they were right with them. You know, I remember late in the game, there was a possession. Johnny Malks just gets in the middle of the field. There was an absolutely perfect forehand huck to Aaron Bartlett. And I look over and Malks being marked by Jeff Babbitt and Bartlett being covered by Conrad Schluer. And when you could have your handler throw it to your fourth cutter on your O-line and beat two of the best defensive players maybe in the world, like, you're doing things right. Like, Truck is a legit contender. They're not the little brother here yet. It's going to be tough, but I think that they can beat this Pony team, and they're one of the few teams I think can go out there and play with Pony and not play their absolute A1 best possible game and potentially still get the win.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're clearly the second best team in the division right now. I think that was a winnable game in the U.S. Open final. I mean, how could it not be? If you're up 11-10 in a game, you could obviously win it. And it's just some execution mistakes, and credit to Pony. Their defensive pressure really amplified over the course of the game. But, you know, really good performances from their stars. I mean, Jacques Nissen, 4 assists, no turns. Johnny Malks had 2 goals, 3 assists, only 1 turnover. I think the question is, can their D buy them a couple more breaks? I don't think it's going to work like last year where their O would go like whole games without getting broken and they'd win by like 2. They need their D line to get them breaks. And they got a couple in this game, but not enough to offer the offense some cushion late. And so I think that's going to be the challenge, is like, do they have enough depth? Because they simply cannot roll out the same quality of defensive players that New York can. They just can't. So they're going to have to figure out how to manufacture a couple of extra breaks. And yeah, you know, their O is going to probably have to only get broken once or twice in the game. But that's possible because that's how good this team is offensively.
I think Malks and Bartlett both have taken steps forward too. I think Alexandre Fall is also, like, he and Musadia, I think, are both going to be in potential breakout player of the year conversations. So I think those guys stepping forward. Like, I don't think they had Troy Holland this weekend. So, you know, there's still some meat on the bone for their defense to get better. But yeah, I really like what we saw from Truck Stop. And, you know, just because we're talking about the invulnerability of Pony, I think it would be easy to overlook how DC performed at this tournament.
Well, let's talk about Machine. Same scoreline for Pony over Machine in their game, 15-13, Machine losing in semis. They also played a pretty compelling game in pool play. Pony went way up early, but Machine really kind of got it going more in the second half. And, you know, this game was also tight. Machine, if you can believe it, was up 11-10. They were up 12-11, and then they lost 15-13.
They were up 8-5 at half.
Yes, they were. So does this Machine team have the goods to beat Pony and win the national championship?
To me, they're not on the tier with Truck Stop. They're with Rhino and Bravo. Like, they're going to have to play very, very, very well to beat Machine, or to beat Pony. I mean, I don't know that I quite see the defensive teeth necessary. It's interesting that they have Nate Goff playing on the O-line now. And even then, he's part of a rotation. He does play most points, but, you know, they have like Keegan North or Paul Arders taking a point off here or there. I wonder if you might see that shift a little bit more. So we see Arders and North playing like every point and maybe more D points for Goff. Goff was awesome on offense. I think that they have some playmakers, you know, guys like Jace Bruner or Xavier Payne after the turn that they're hoping can kind of blossom into making that D-line its own weapon. But right now they feel like their O-line is really the core strength. And even then, they have a bunch of shot takers. So you wonder about how efficient can this line truly be game to game. Machine definitely impressed me. They were better than I expected they would be, but I'm still not sure I'm ready to buy in.
It's the Joe White experience, Keith. That this team will rise or fall based on the play of one of the most dynamic playmakers in the game, who is also one of the most volatile players in the division. Joe White can do things on the field that are like almost no other player can. He can be insanely productive, and then he can throw 2 or 3 turnovers in the span of 2 points. And I really think we're going to need to see him be able to withstand the pressure of top level matchups from teams like Pony and deliver with few to no turnovers if this team is going to go far. I think they have the personnel to make it happen. Structurally, their defense has always been one of the best in the division. They have the amazing zone. I love some of the additions to their roster. Jeff Gow, I thought, played fantastic. On the offensive side, Malik Oje-Sama was awesome. I didn't know this dude had it in him like that. I mean, I've seen him playing in the AUDL, nice player for Montreal, but I didn't know that he was like a legit big-time playmaker, and he looked all the part on this team. So love what he brought to the roster. I feel like some of their depth guys have been getting better. Asher Lance looks better. I wonder if we're going to see some rotational changes. I think they do need to maybe make some changes. Is Walden Nelson, does he still have it, Keith? Love the guy. He's a legend in Chicago. He should be on the team as a leader, but I don't know if he should be a starting D-line guy anymore.
Udonis Haslam here.
I mean, let's not go that far, but I just think that they're close. They're closer than you say they are. They have the offensive weapons to get it done, and they have some of the top individual playmakers like Bansfield and Joe White. Goff looks better than ever. I mean, he looks like a perfect fit on the O-line. I expect him to play O the whole season. I mean, it would be wrong to put him on D except for crossover points. I thought Xavier Payne played well. I like the roster. I like the composition. Sure, they're not as deep as Pony, but it really does feel to me like it comes down to, will their offense execute in crunch time? And it didn't against Pony.
No, and maybe having Nate Goff paired with Joe White is the secret sauce. When those couple of turnovers crop up, when Joe White goes for a 30-yard scuba to the back cone, Nate Goff's there to clean it up a little bit. So I think we saw what this offense can look like when it's humming. They do have a lot of speed. They have some big throwers. They're very dynamic. They can shift people around. Pavel looks very comfortable marshaling this group. So yeah, I do think we've seen some of the upside for the offense. And I agree that they had some players stepping up. Henry Goldenberg also, I think, was getting some O-line run, and he had a good weekend too. So I'll be curious to see how this team develops. It's funny that we have opposite concerns, though. You're a little more concerned with the efficiency of the O-line. I'm a little more concerned, can this team generate breaks consistently? So those are we see different potential holes in Machine, which I think lends credence to the idea that they're not quite at the level with Truck and being a top challenger.
It's fair. It's fair. Pretty interesting team though. Who else stood out to you from the rest of the division?
Well, we mentioned Bravo. The top end here is very clear. When they're playing well, they're very scary. They play with a lot of pace. They've got a lot of athletes. They don't back down from anybody. They're, this is not the vert stack throw a million hammers Bravo that I think we've all grown accustomed to. This is like this small ball, bounce it off of people. Basically, everybody's trying to be Calvin Snowden now. I actually think it was more like, hey, Calvin fits perfectly into what we want to do now, and let's play to our personnel. So this new style for Bravo, I think, lends itself to their high energy level of play. So they're scary. if they end up as, a 2 seed in your nationals pool, they're going to be a real thorn in somebody's side. I do think they could also go out there and, give up a game to a Condors or whatnot, but they have the capacity to play at a truly elite level.
Quinn Finer is in the early player of the year conversation.
Dude's a beast.
21 assists, 6 goals on 5 turnovers. That's insane. So how did he must have been one of the top assist throwers at the tournament. Has to have been. He was number 2 behind Matt Hecht, who had 26.
And he's doing all this with a broken nose and a face mask on.
He was awesome this weekend. I mean, look, they lost a machine, pony and truck. And kind of like close to machine, not that close to truck, not close at all to pony. It sounds about right. They feel like they're a step behind those teams, but still they were the best of the rest. They beat Rhino 15-12. They are interesting because they would go 4 or 5 points of playing perfect ultimate. And then they would bumble their way through the next 3 or 4 points and give up 2 or 3 breaks. They're very streaky individually inside of a game.
And this is without Alex Atkins, who has Joe White levels of unbelievable play and streakiness.
And confidence. Yes, that's true. Which, Alex Atkins played incredible in the finals of last year's national championship, and they won the tournament against a team that had beaten them already in the tournament and had been the best team all season. So that Bravo's got that same capacity in them. Whether they can string it together like they did last year, I don't know. I just think that they caught lightning in a bottle at the right time last year. I wouldn't rule it out, but I would call it a low probability outcome. Dig also played pretty well, but they lost to Revolver along with Truck and Machine. But I thought they showed some flashes, and they were missing a lot of guys, Keith.
Yeah. They also look like a work in progress. There's still a lot to figure out for them. And they were very much, maybe it's because they were missing so many guys. So they're like, all right, we're just going to try and kind of work on things. And I am curious to see how their mental game looks when they're all together.
I would just like to shout out Josh Cricket Marquette for having 9 goals, 8 assists, and only 1 turnover. The dude is still just getting it done on offense, Keith. 1 turnover.
I don't know how he's still hacking it out here. He's got to be great Grandmasters eligible.
All right, let's. I kind of sullied Revolver, but they actually went 4-2. They beat Dig and Rhino. They lost badly to Truck and by 3 to Pony. Is Revolver back?
I mean, when someone says is Revolver back, when I think of Revolver being Revolver, it's title contention year in and year out. And that's not this team. So to me, that's what Revolver being back means. I don't think they ever stunk. So they still look good. I think quarters is a real possibility for this team. I think they're going to be right in that mix of pre-quarters, quarters, quality teams. I am not quite sure I see them beating one of the elite teams, even 15-11 win over Rhino withstanding. I'm not sure that I quite see it yet, but.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to the mixed division.
Where everything makes sense.
It was chaotic is putting it nicely. This was a wild tournament. AMP ends up winning it all. They beat BFG 15-13. AMP was the 7 seed coming into the event. And they lost their opening game to Mixtape 15-12. No team went undefeated in the mixed division. And that almost understates it. Teams got awesome wins and then had weird losses. Or Noise played really tight with BFG, gets a win, and then plays them again in semis and gets blown out, crushed by 10. So it was a weird one, Keith. AMP, though, comes away as ostensibly the top team in the country out of this tournament. But are you even convinced of that?
On that day, yes. I mean, they were the best team on that day. And I've long professed my adoration for the talent that populates the AMP roster, but my hesitation with jumping on board, given that I feel like I felt that way for years and it doesn't always come to fruition. I still feel that way, even with some of the personnel losses they had. But their women matching players were still class of the division. I don't think that was a big shock, but they really gave the keys to Paul Owens, Henry Ng, and said that, like, as far as our offense is gonna go, like, y'all are driving the bus. Shout out to Eric Wimmer though. I was not familiar with Eric Wimmer before this weekend. I think he used to play for Loco. Nice come up for him. He's stepped in to fill in a bigger role on the male matching side for them too. But yeah, I think that this is a kind of intriguing team, and they're super athletic. They don't always play a clean game, but they're apt to go out there and get some blocks and a few skies, and all of a sudden you're like, what the heck just happened? So I think that they feel a little bit like Mixtape has felt in years past. Like, it's not always going to be the prettiest, but they're going to make a big show of it, and they're going to embarrass somebody, and they're good when they roll. So that's the AMP that I see right now, and they outclassed the BFG team that I picked them to lose to, although it still was fairly close. But they're real title contenders in part because, like, who else, right? There's no this is the team right now. So why not AMP?
There is no definitive favorite right now. I don't think going towards the second half of the season, Pro Champs, Nationals.
Dragon Thrust lost 4 games, and all of them were on double game point, including to Voltaje. What am I doing? I
don't know how they
this
lost to
information?
Voltaje. That's
I'm not
ludicrous.
About the algorithm. I don't have to process this.
Looking at AMP's results, they offer a matchup problem to a lot of teams because they have a very high level of athleticism. I think it's why they beat BFG in the final. BFG is a team that would like to play against another system team because they just do that better than most other system teams that are like very kind of like deliberate on offense, that like to run the unders, and they have BFG's offense happy to just grind, unders, score. Quote unquote boring ultimate. AMP is not really trying to do that. I mean, I think they're capable of doing that, but they're trying to shoot it to Lindsay McKenna. They're trying to air it out. They're trying to get Henry Ng in isolation. They want to, go dunk on you. And I don't think that's a good matchup for BFG. But interestingly, it maybe is a good matchup for Mixtape. And maybe it was game 1. I don't want to overread into it, but like Mixtape has that kind of athleticism to match AMP, and they won that game by 3. So I think stylistic matchups are going to be a big part of what we see at Nationals. I still have a lot of questions about a lot of teams. Shame looked really good this weekend. They were arguably the most impressive overall team. They beat Dragon Thrust and Ellipsis on day 1. They crushed Noise. They lose by 3 to AMP, and then they beat Mixtape and destroyed Polar Bears. Yes, they lost to AMP, which once again, I think Shame's a team that's like kind of like got that explosiveness factor, but maybe isn't as polished and probably not as talented, especially on the women matching player side, as AMP. So stylistically, maybe not the best for them. I'm not sure. But they overall maybe had, you could argue they had the best resume, but they did lose heads up to AMP, so make of that what you will. But then, you got a team like Exist that looked good, played a lot of close games. I think almost looking at the stats, almost ran too deep. Like there's too many players spreading out the workload. I think that's okay for a tournament in early August, but I would like to see them concentrate their touches into more of their top players. Jenny De Jesus was still awesome, but you have to have questions in your mind after they lose that BFG game by 1, and then they go out and lose to Polar Bears. Well, that Exist shouldn't be losing to Polar Bears. No disrespect to Polar Bears, but they're just not on the same level. So, there's so many teams that feel like they had some good results, but also a clunker or two.
That is the whole summation of it. There was nobody who really was consistently fantastic, but there were flashes from a lot of different teams, and that is going to make for a very compelling setup for both regionals and nationals. I think we're probably going to see some upsets at regionals. I think nationals, it's going to be a lot about matchups, but also just like who's playing well at the right time. I think there are positives about pretty much every team that was in that top group, but there's also like there are things to look at and say like, okay, what does this mean about this team? Shame, I agree with you. Like they lost heads up to Amp. Jay McLaughlin, I think, has a all club kind of case that she's making right now. But their team in general has a high flying playing style. They're bringing in some new pieces that they're integrating to their team too. So very interesting to see where the Shame team's going to develop into, because I pegged them before the tournament as a potential upset team, a team that could add volatility, but I think that could work the other way down the line too.
All right, let's talk the women's division. Scandal goes undefeated, continuing their undefeated season, undisputed number one in the country right now, as they take down Fury 15-13 in the final in a game that was kind of a blowout until Fury made a late push to get back and came very close to maybe delivering a riot disaster level breakdown to Scandal. But Keith, you've been so high on this Scandal team. Here's your chance. Wax poetic. Why are they playing so well, and what had them clicking this weekend?
Well, it doesn't hurt that Claire Trop just absolutely ransacked everybody to the tune of 19 goals and 18 assists, which is ridiculous, leading the tournament in both categories.
That is insane. Never seen that.
Yeah, wild stuff for Claire Trop. Cami Groom and Blaise Sevier and Claire Trop all together on the same field is really just a lot to ask of any team to deal with. It's Blaise Sevier is really turning into she's like studying under the tutelage of these fellow speedsters. Just like, so what do I do when I can just run past the people that are guarding me? And they're like, well, here's how you do it. So she's playing really well. I thought their handlers, I was a little worried about their handler group, especially early on in the tournament. I still don't know if they have like that rock center handler person. Jenny Faye's back on the team. She's playing D-line. But I feel like any of the handlers could go off like in a specific game. Like you could have Marge Walker or Jess Sourbeer or Shirley Wool or Lisa Dang, like just kind of hit you for 4 or 5 assists, and you don't exactly know when that's going to come. And I don't know if that's necessarily reliable, but they also are missing people at points that like Ashley Buick didn't play in the back end of the weekend. She's going to add to that defensive challenge that you have to dealing with Trop, Groom, and Sevier. Right, they're going to get some of the players that weren't at the tournament back. So there's still meat on the bone, which is exciting for Scandal fans. Like, I think they maybe overshot a little bit this weekend in some ways, but like you can't be mad. Like the signs are all great, and I think that they're going to continue to get better. Maybe you worry a little bit about peaking early, but I see outs that make it feel like that's not necessarily the case.
Is Claire Trop the best player in the division right now?
Oh yeah. That's light work. That's a layup question.
You take a team that didn't play in 2021, right? They didn't come back. We were questioning whether Scandal was going to exist as a program. Then they come back in 22, and they're fine. They're like where we expect them to be. They're pre-quarters, quarters level team. They add some depth. They get Cami Groom onto the roster. Now, that's a big pickup. You bring back some stars from the past, and you have some players level up like Claire Trop. And it's not like Claire Trop wasn't good before, but she has ascended to a new level at this point. And that is a recipe for a team outperforming expectations. And here's my concern about them. Okay, Keith? It's not even that they peak too early. My concern is that they have so much continuity from the PUL season that they already are just further along than other teams. And as people watch tape and get a sense of where their weak spots are and try to force the disc out of the hands of a Claire Trop, for instance, and into the hands of maybe a weaker handler set, that's going to cause problems for this Scandal team, particularly on offense down the road. I don't know for sure. I certainly think it's a good sign that Scandal is actually putting top level players on the offensive line instead of just like giving up 5 or 6 breaks a game every game and hoping that their D-line makes it up, which they often would. But I just think that they look more polished and more ready now than, for instance, a Fury, who looks like they're still kind of like figuring out who's going to play on key possessions on which line. And Keith, it was 13-7 in the final, and the final score is 15-13. Does that give you any concerns, just the way that game ended?
I wouldn't say that it gives me concerns about Scandal. I mean, Fury was playing absolutely terrible, just catastrophic. Like you're on the boat and holes are popping, screws are going loose, the water's flooding in, just like you put out one fire, there's another one. This part just fell off. Like it was a disaster in the first half. Just throwaways, drops, everything that they could throw. And like Scandal was playing well, but Fury just came out and laid a massive egg and then figured stuff out and started to play some good defense. Scandal wasn't quite as hot in the second half. And so things evened out a little bit. I think it was kind of the balance of the game. I think it's probably more representative of how the two teams stack up against each other. They just both happened in spurts rather than dispersed across the game like you might usually see. So I think it's just Fury being good and not that much worse than Scandal. And Scandal had the big lead, and I'm glad they were able to finish off. That could have been pretty unnerving for, I don't want to call them a young team, but like a young program, I would say. There are some vets on this team. I actually like that about them. I think having players who've been there and done that and know how to win and how to respond is going to be very valuable for them, especially given that like they don't have a Dutchie to lean on anymore, you know? And to that point, I think the coaching changeover also seems like it is more impactful. I think it's good that they are not tied to the past, and having a reset actually seems to kind of have worked out for them. And if it didn't work out for them, they made it work. You know, they made lemonade out of these lemons and said, okay, how can we bounce back from this time off? They look deep. They look athletic. They look like they have a strong game plan. And yeah, I agree with you. I think after people see some tape, they're going to start seeing a lot more sagging, a lot more junk, a lot of the stuff that they used to do, honestly, to teams. Just kind of like muck things up, take the disc out of the hands of their cutters and try and negate some of their speed advantages, make it more about their handler play. But, they have time to adapt to that too.
Claire Trop, 5 goals, 4 assists in the final. Just
including the number 2 play on Sports Center is one of those goals.
That's right. Was it a goal though, Keith?
Yes.
It was.
There's I can't see how it's not a tie. At best,
it was maybe a tie. If you have to go frame by frame, it's might as well be considered a tie in real time.
Yeah, I don't blame either player for holding their position on that play. But just like it's because it's almost impossible to ask even a human brain to interpret that in real time. It's just not realistic. If you can go up through 2 defenders, get 2 hands on the disc, and catch it so close that it is effectively a tie with one of the defenders, like take your flowers, take your Sports Center top 2. You're there.
Brute Squad gets to the semis. They defeat Molly Brown 15-11, then they lose to Fury in semis 15-10. Kind of a weird weekend for Brute Squad. What did you make of their performance?
I'm trying to decide exactly what to make of this Molly Brown Brute Squad result because it feels kind of defining. Like if you take that Molly Brown piece away from Brute Squad, they kind of have a flat weekend. You're kind of disappointed with a team that split with Mud, who was good, to be clear. That Mud team was good. But they lose to Fury. They get the win over Traffic. That's solid. But like you're not impressed by what they put together. But then you add in that Molly Brown win, where to my understanding, Molly Brown did not play very well. But the Brute Squad is like, I don't know exactly where the focal points of their team are right now. They didn't have Amy Jo, which I think is a potential big difference maker for them. And they're asking Yuga Zhao and Tulsa Douglas to do a lot of work for them. They seem a little shorthanded. I think getting Levka Volchak will give them a lot more identity. We saw what a huge impact player she could be for them last year. So after everything, sadly, I feel like I got to give them a little bit of an incomplete, because they did some good things, did some things that you're a little concerned about, but missing Levka and some of the other top players that I think they're going to be adding to this roster kind of feels like hard to really place a firm judgment on them at this point.
Especially considering that Levka was easily a top 3 player for them last season. Yeah, it feels very TBD. I think, frankly, it's the most surprising thing is that they beat Mali and that they beat them 15-11.
Yeah.
Like, them losing that game, you would have been like, yeah, okay, this all makes sense for where Brute Squad is right now. But instead, they beat this Mali team. So what the heck is going on with Mali? I thought they were going to easily make semis and have a good chance to win the tournament. That was their only loss. But when you look through their results, it's not like they didn't get a chance to play anybody all that good. They beat Sixers, Flipside twice, Nightlock, and Schwa. Those are not, that was the schedule they had in front of them, but those are not amazing wins.
No, Molly Brown got their best game and played really poorly in it. And we have a small sample size to work with, but how can you not be a little concerned by that? Like, are they going to show up to semis at nationals and do this? I mean, it's early August, so there's, you don't even need to hover your hand around the panic button, but take note, say, okay, what do we need to worry about this team? And that you can file that away. They're still clearly super talented. And outside of that game, I think they looked pretty good, but you just never really got a great sense of who they're going to be down the line, because we didn't get any more of those testers.
And, they've got all the talent that they could possibly need. They basically run it back from last year. And, Valeria is playing at a super high level. She had 12 assists, 4 goals, 3 blocks, and only 3 turnovers on the weekend. That's an amazing stat line. Manu doing her thing. Ni Win piling up goals. I don't see any reason that they can't be great. Maybe you want to see Claire turn down the turnovers a little bit. She had 10 on the weekend on just 8 assists. But I feel like, Claire playing D, it's like you're going to have some turns. I don't know. I need to see them at Pro Champs before I really cast judgment on them. They had some bad results at the beginning of last season too. Remember, they got totally embarrassed by Fury, and then they changed everything up. I mean, the big difference is they don't have their coach anymore, right? So Joaquin Nagel is no longer coaching this team. So will they be able to work through it as easily as they did last year? Maybe. But definitely raises concerns for me. And I lost so much money in the super contest betting on this team to make the finals. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Keith, where else do you look? I mean, let's take this chance to talk about some of the international teams. Mud makes the semis. They lose 15-11 to Scandal. I think they were the most impressive of the international teams that were at the tournament, but I think a lot of them showed up and did a nice job. How about the upset over Sakai for Mutiny? That was crazy. Even though that's not really an international team.
Yeah, that's a pickup team with some international pickups. Look, somebody pointed out this in the Discord. I want to say it was Ravi, but it was, if I had known that Mud was Mud plus Uno, I might have felt that they were better than the 10 seed. If I knew they were going to pick up 2 World Games players, might have known that they were going to be pretty good, and they were. They were at the level of semifinals teams. Making the semifinals was not a fluke. They didn't get an easy path. I think they were right at the front of the line for best of the rest. Shout out to Ellipsis too. Speaking of teams with some all-stars, I said during our subscribers bonus podcast, maybe the editors are going to blank this part out, so you have to subscribe to hear it. But I said that I thought maybe Rob Andrews was the best player in the mixed division at this tournament, and I probably still stand by that. Maybe Henry did enough in the final that it's okay, Henry's earned it, but Rob Andrews very, very impressive.
Yeah. Otherwise, Sixers, Flipside, decent results. Hard for me to see either of those teams making semis of nationals. Flipside did get the head-to-head over Sixers 13-9. Flip side, only losing to Mud by 1 and then twice to Molly Brown. Didn't really get a lot of other tester games. Still a very good team. Kirsten Pajunas, Kayla Helton, Caitlin Weaver, doing a lot of work for them. I just don't know if they have quite enough depth to really challenge the top level teams, but they're going to be a solid quarters team.
I think they're going to occupy the role that we've kind of cast Scandal in the past years of like, you're not quite inside of that elite tier, but you're the scariest team in the next tier. Like they could take somebody in quarters and that they're the team you don't want to draw.
How do you feel about Sixers?
Just feels like there's some ceiling off this team, and maybe we should give them a little grace and give them some adjustment time to get used to playing without some of the big name players that they don't have anymore, and figuring out, okay, what are we going to do with BDS right now? Even last year when they had Kamara, it was like, okay, do we want to initiate BDS downfield? Do we want her taking the centering pass? Like how many touches does she need? How much defense can she play? So, figuring some of this stuff out, I think is going to be part of the process for them. I think they were a little bit short, either that or they have a shorter roster this year. But yeah, they lost so many key offensive pieces, it feels like, that it's hard to expect them to just immediately hit the ground running. So maybe you count on this team figuring some things out on the back end. There's a reason that they've been good for a number of years now, but it's just hard to see the same kind of title contention. Maybe is even strong for where they were, but it's hard to see that elite tier ceiling that they had in the past.
All right, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking with Claire Trop and Kat Ritzmann of Washington, D.C. Scandal, your champions at the U.S. Open. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Joining us now on Deep Look are two members of the currently fully undefeated Washington, D.C. Scandal team. Claire Trop and Kat Ritzmann join us this morning. Hello, Claire, Kat, how are you?
Well, thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks for having us. Doing well.
Thank you for joining us. Coming off of an undefeated run through the U.S. Open, another tight game with Fury in the final. You close it out 15-13, which, you were up big in that game. It's not quite as close as it maybe looked. So, Claire, I just want to ask you first, what a dream start to the season for Scandal. How is the team feeling right now, and how are you feeling about the way things have shaped up so far in this 2023 season?
Yeah, I think we're really excited to have such a great result early. I think the way that I'm looking at it, and many of us are looking at it, is that it's like a really opportunity to get our feet a little bit wet and challenge ourselves against some of the best teams, but a lot of season left to play. So not getting too hyped about an early season win.
And Kat, were you at all surprised by how well the team did, or did you come in expecting, hey, we've looked really great and I think we could go out there and beat anybody?
I think there's a little bit of both. We definitely have kind of that underdog mentality, especially coming in seeded 7th. We didn't really know what to expect from a lot of these really high elite level teams. And especially in that first Fury game, we just came in and we said, let's use this as an opportunity to learn and grow as a team. And we just got really pumped up and trusted each other. And we have a lot of really, really strong players on our team this year. There's not really a huge drop off in talent or athleticism or skill. So I think we used our depth in both games and throughout the whole weekend, which was super fun to see different people in different roles really elevate their game this weekend.
Obviously, Scandal has been a strong team for a long time. Championships back in the 2010s and, changeover in the roster. But even in years where the team hasn't done as well, it's still been generally a quarters team, top 8 team. Last year, finishing tied for 7th at Nationals. What do you feel like what obviously at this point, you got to be thinking this team can win a championship. What has made that jump from last year to this year? You look at the results from last year's Nationals, they were good. Losing to Phoenix, losing to Molly, and that was it. I mean, you beat everybody else. So what has leveled this team up so far this season? And I guess I can ask that to Claire.
Yeah, I think that we've been kind of thinking about bringing Scandal back post-pandemic as something of a multi-year process. And so last year was, I think, everything we hoped it would be in terms of like effectively a brand new team that hadn't been around in 3 or 4 years. And I think this year we're just like kind of building on that foundation. I think something that's really been excellent is that some of our like more local talent who was maybe playing with different teams or has like moved to the area recently has joined us. And I think that's really rounded out our roster. We had a pretty small roster last year and we're bumping up on the limit this year. So more players and more talent. But I think really growing and trying to continue to build from that which we like laid in place last year, and that foundation is really critical. And then with respect to the team in previous iterations, maybe like post or pre 2019, I think that we've put a really strong emphasis on having local players. I think like Scandal was fairly well known for having like a handful of like kind of all-star travel players in the past. And I think our farthest player is like in Richmond, like 2 hours away this year. And so I think being local and having everyone at weeknight practices and also just like having that kind of like camaraderie of like all being in one community, I think has really been important for the investment and growing as a team.
It seems like you mentioned the depth, Kat, and you kind of spoke to this as well, Claire, that the team is almost unearthed some hidden gems. And I think there were like, I heard 19 players from DC Shadow who are also playing with Scandal this year. How do you feel like the presence of DC Shadow in that season impacted Scandal's ability to compete in this club season? And I'll send that to Kat.
Yeah. The turnover from Shadow to Scandal was super high this year. And there was also, we have the same coach as Shadow for Scandal. So it was really nice to be able to get those like very early season reps in, March, April, May, to kind of just teach everyone the systems that we were going to use on Scandal, and get everyone playing in, certain roles that maybe they would see in the summertime as well. So I think it definitely helped a lot. And we also got some high level, just experience on big stages in front of crowds, which I think was really helpful as well. We got to play Radiance in the semifinals, on our home field, which was awesome. So I think just getting people that experience, early on has really, really helped, Scandal success this year.
Just to follow up on that, obviously the team, coming in as the number 1 seed in the PUL postseason, but you lose that game to the Radiance. What do you take away from that coming towards the club season, if anything?
Yeah, I think that like it always sucks to lose. But I actually think in my mind, it's in some ways a good thing. Like I think there's nothing that quite like lights the fire and makes you want to work hard as like feeling like you underperformed. And I think the team is like pretty committed to not trying our best anyway to not have that feeling in the club season. So I think it's like pretty motivating, at least for me.
I want to talk more about the U.S. Open itself, in particular, matching up with Fury twice and coming away with a pair of wins. The team had seemed like everything was working in that first half of the final against Fury. From your perspective, what do you think helped Scandal have so much success against such an accomplished team that is so well regarded, Claire?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Fury. They're like a fantastic team. My share of losses to them, I'm not quite as lucky as Kat to be like perpetually undefeated there. But I think that in kind of contrary to like the classic, like it's hard to beat a team twice, I think that actually really served us well to get a chance to like play at that level early in the tournament, and like figure out some things that were and weren't working on O&D and kind of give some people who are newer to playing a team like Fury, who plays like very physical defense, plays a lot of FM, getting them like some opportunities to get like early reps there, and then kind of be able to convert that into a little bit more success in the finals. Yeah.
Claire, you did something that I don't think we've ever seen. We've been doing, Keith and I in particular, been doing this a long time, like 10 years. And you finished the tournament with as a leading goal scorer and the leading assist thrower, which is just not something that happens ever. So I just wanted to ask you, what we obviously saw you playing at an incredibly high level, making the World Games team, huge contributor on the World Games team. It's not a surprise to see you excelling, but what has helped you to get to this point where, you are going out against Fury and putting up, 5 goals and 4 assists and just like blowing the doors off teams?
Yeah. Well, I've moved to the O-line.
Always a good start.
Yeah, that's big. And that's been actually a really new and exciting challenge for me. I think it's a pretty different mentality. And Kat has been teaching me the way of being chill on O-line and not just throwing it away. But I think that my actual hope for nationals is to do less, I think. I think it's an early season tournament and we're figuring things out. And I think it's awesome to be able to be an eject for the team, but we have so much talent on our O-line, on our D-line. And I think that as we get more reps together at practice, I think that's going to be an early season, kind of, surprise that I was able to do that much. And I really think everyone else is going to be huge contributors at nationals. So, yeah, I think it was exciting and fun. I'm glad to be able to bring that to the team in a moment when we needed it, but I'm fully confident that that's not going to be necessary really by the end of the season, because I just think we have the skill to really spread that out amongst the team, be a team where everyone's scoring goals, everyone's scoring assists, and we can just punch it in. And if you take one thing away, we're going to hit you with something else. So, early season, my thought.
I'm also curious about some of the depth of the team, because I think there are perhaps players who really excelled at this tournament who fans might not know as well. Kat, who are some of the players you feel really stepped up for the team this weekend?
Yeah, there are so many. I think on D-line, Lisa Dang really held down our backfield. She really moved the disc well this weekend and found pockets of space that I haven't seen. So she played really confidently, which is what we want from her. Blaise Sevier on the O-line, she played rally last year and then in the mixed division, and then came over and wanted to play women's with us. She's been crushing and just super good target for Claire, super good target on the O-line. And she's also been throwing some crazy huck bombs. So that's really been fun to see. So those two definitely come to mind. We were also missing a few people this weekend. So having a smaller roster, getting all of those reps for everybody was super valuable, I think. And people had to, kind of morph into different roles, which was fun to see as well. So lots of people, but those two definitely stand out in my mind.
We've already heard both of you sort of mention that this is an early season tournament. It's the middle of the season in some ways, but it does feel like a lot of teams are still kind of just getting those high level reps for the first time. So one of the things that I know teams think about is, okay, how do we make sure we don't peak too soon? How do we make sure that we bring this to nationals? And of course, other teams are going to be looking to make adjustments. What do you do when you win all your games at a tournament like this? How do you go back and say, all right, because you're both on the strategy committee, where are areas that we need to improve to be ready for what teams are hypothetically going to do against us when we get into the postseason?
I think a lot of teams found success against us, even if we ended up pulling out those games. And so I think critically analyzing the ways in which we fell short in those moments is going to be crucial. I mean, we came up on top by Fury by, over the weekend, 2 and 1 points. So it's neither of those games is by any means we figured out how to beat Fury perpetually. So I think
we're good.
Yeah, we're totally fine. So I think, we're going to, meet as a group and figure out what are the things we really need to be working on to fill some of those gaps. And then, we're lucky to have pro champs in Milwaukee as well, where we can, continue to test ourselves. But I think the way that I'm thinking about this is, as a fairly new team, I think it was really important to kind of prove to ourselves that we were going to be able to compete at this level and that we can hang with any of the best teams in the country. And so I think that from a mentality perspective, that is like a huge bonus for us. And now we have to figure out the rest of the on-field pieces to figure out how to put the rest of our players together.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on a great weekend and an amazing start to the season. You've got the inside track, of course, on the number 1 seed at the national championships, which is also a nice bonus. So appreciate you coming on and talking with us, and good luck at Pro Champs. We'll see you there.
Thank you so much.
Kat Ritzmann, Claire Trop with us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Great to talk with Claire and Kat. And Keith, you know what? I thought it was pretty interesting to hear Claire say, I'm hoping to not be as involved moving forward. I don't know if that's actually what Scandal wants, but I do think being able to play with a reduced reliance on Trop is probably going to be important for them moving forward as teams adjust and try to take her away.
Agreed, but I don't know if our teammates are like, I think our teammates are like, no, we want to keep giving you the disc. It's working really well. You don't want it to be your only option. But, Claire's an incredibly humble athlete, and I think is proud to have all this attention, but doesn't necessarily want it. And I think that's also true on the field. Happy to contribute to the team, but it would love for others to get the shine as well. But the fact is that she's probably the best player in the women's division right now. And generally that means you should get the rock.
Yeah, you should get as many touches as possible. Let's talk a little YCC before we get to the AUDL second round of the playoffs, which is coming up this weekend. Boys division, Utah Swarm gets a back-to-back championship. They win 15-7 over the Foggy Bottom boys after going down a break to start the game. Keith, this Utah team was something else. I mean, we had multiple coaches say that they have never seen a youth team with this much depth and this much quality all the way down the lines. They just overwhelmed every team that they came up against.
Not exactly a huge surprise, right? We thought they might get some sort of real challenge along the way, but no, I mean, this was a lot of the core of last year's team. It was easy to see them being super successful. They have some real top end guys. Nate DeMorgan had a fantastic tournament. 24 assists or something and 3 turnovers. It's ridiculous. It makes me think that the stats weren't even right, because how can you be the center handler for a team that's playing in the toughest games and only have 3 turnovers? It's ridiculous. So yeah, they were the class of the division. And shout out to Foggy Bottom. I thought maybe they could tightrope walk their way through a decent final performance. Just never give up the ball, but even Utah even made them look like they were shaky.
Yeah, pretty awesome win for Foggy Bottom over Philadelphia SEPTA. A surprise team in some ways. 14 seed getting to semis. 15-14 final score in that one. And I think the de facto final was actually the semi between Triforce and Utah. Pretty good game. Triforce went down. The triangle just went down way too big early in the game. They were able to fight back a couple breaks late, but just didn't have the legs. Tobias Brooks, as good as promised, but maybe a little loose with the disc at times and just had to do too much. He just didn't have enough left, and the depth wasn't there for that team to compete with Utah, who could just send out wave after wave of defenders and not really put too much workload on any one guy.
The other semifinal though was maybe the better show. We had some wild plays in that Philly DC game and some crazy performances. Sam Grossberg and Kyle Ford from Philly had 8 assists and 8 goals respectively, or something dumb. So it was a nuts game.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that wasn't it 9 goals?
Was it 9? Is that what we ended up with?
I believe I lost track. 9. Kyle Ford, 9 goals, no assists, no blocks, no turns.
There's some massive layouts, just big plays all over the place in that one.
and Grossberg had 9 assists on 4 turnovers. But it wasn't quite enough, as Foggy Bottom, I think, a little bit superior depth, able to grind it out. Mitchell Blaha was very good all weekend. Marcus Lee. So nice tournament, but a beatdown. And that's going to be a theme of these YCC games. Over in the girls division, it was Seattle Seven Hills, just trouncing Oregon Downpour, the defending champs, 15-7. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. Keith, you were saying this Oregon team there was nobody who was going to beat them, and Seattle just dunked all over them in the final.
Got to be the least likely quadrant coming into that game for me. Like, I could have seen Oregon blowing out Seattle. I could have seen really tight game either way. That probably was my favorite outcome. This I did not see coming. I mean, Seattle jumped all over them. Seven Hills just rolled from there. Seven Hills had a lot of depth, a lot of defensive pressure, and Downpour looked a little shook. I think that it got a bit windy during that round, and that kind of took away some of the deep game that I think Downpour does so well, and that seemed to stifle them a little bit in a way that it didn't affect Seven Hills so much. So, very impressive performance, great showing of depth from Seven Hills, but Seattle back on top. That's where they want to be, and they were thinking about getting this one because Downpour had won the tournament, and Seattle had to watch that, and their high school teams had gone up against each other. South Eugene has done so well. I think this was a little bit of cold revenge.
Well, you think about like South Eugene. This is mostly a South Eugene team that makes up this Oregon Downpour roster. Very similar star players, Ollie Bunsen in the backfield. And they had a lot of turnovers, that South Eugene team, in the HSNI final against Roosevelt, who had a lot of players on the Seattle roster. But this is more than Roosevelt, right? This was Roosevelt plus a lot of really good talent from the Seattle area. It was a better team than what Roosevelt had in the HSNI final. South Eugene had a lot of turns, and they often didn't get punished for it. The difference here, Seattle punished the turnovers. Bunsen had 4 assists and 9 turnovers. And I would imagine it was a similar stat line. I can't remember it exactly, but similar kind of results in the HSNI final. But this time, Seattle able to punish, and really just strong performances down the roster. Ella Widmeyer, Zaza Gelfand, obviously Chloe Hakimi was fantastic. Milo Brown played well. So they were just the best top to bottom team, and it showed through in the end.
Agreed. They looked the part the whole way. Shout out to Utah though. I was curious if they would be the best contender against Oregon. They gave them the best test, right? They lost to them 15-13. They lost by the same score to Seven Hills, so you can make of that what you will. But Stella Onder and Audrey Selfridge put up absolutely bonkers stat lines, so definitely shout out to them for that. They played with a very small roster. They're missing extra players on Sunday. Wild stuff from them.
Audrey Selfridge and Stella Onder went 1-2 in the division in goals. 18 and 16. That is crazy.
Yeah, and
Stella Onder also had 18 assists. She was second in both goals and assists.
Yes, they each spotted 34 goals and assists. And Audrey Selfridge added 10 blocks. Like, those stat lines are wild. Wild.
Mixed division. Seattle crushing. No surprise. 1 seed, just a comical level of talent relative to the rest of the division. They obliterated Oregon 15-6 in the final. Really just never a doubt. And but they didn't just win that game against Oregon. They were just on fire. I mean, they couldn't make a mistake. Oregon would turn it over in their own half. Way too many mistakes from them. And it just felt like there were almost not even turnovers coming from Seattle for much of that game. So they just rolled past them with a showing of depth. Micah Glickman-Flora was very good. Scout Noble was good. You could go down the whole roster. Cedar Hines, fantastic. Rowan Limp, names we know from the high school division, and they all showed up big time for this mixed team.
Yeah, they got their toughest test from Dallas, which I thought was kind of cool. Maybe a community that we're not used to being like, oh, they're at the top of the pile here at YCCs, and arguably was the second best team in the division. Luke Norby looks like a fantastic product. Like he's going to be a prospect that Texas teams and other teams are going to be really interested in adding to the roster one day and when he gets to college. Christine Sullivan was also in takeover mode for parts of the weekend for them. She was very good. I think you have to wonder what would have happened had they had Owen Johnson, who was like their big goal scorer, got hurt earlier in the tournament, had to miss the rest of the tournament. And, given that they gave Seven Hills their best test in semifinals, they lost 15-10. How many goals could they have scored with an extra top end player? Don't know, but hopefully Owen's recovery goes okay and he's doing all right. But very impressive showing from Nightfall at this tournament, and they're returning almost everybody to that team.
In U17 girls, Atlanta gets the win over Philadelphia. In U17 boys, Seattle over Oakland in the final. And Keith, I just wanted to give you a chance to shout out any individual players from the U20 divisions that we haven't already mentioned.
We mentioned a couple so far. Looking at the mixed division, you look at the top end of that Seattle team, Cedar Hines, in addition to Micah Glickenflora, Alexis Juntek-Coca, Leo Renzema from Oregon had a great weekend. Tamir Hill Marshall continued to impress us after a high school national invite. In the girls division, Tatum Kabrilovic from Warhawks, very strong double outing. Eve Masick from Valley Ultimate, they were one of the few teams that kind of broke seed that had some upsets. Defensive zone player, I've never seen anything like how many blocks that she gets. Also was strong offensively. Big for Valley. And in the boys division, Seth Freed from Carolina. I know a lot of the attention's on Tobias Brooks. Seth Freed looks very, very good. Really skillful offensive player, quick, great thrower, very technical. Exactly what you'd expect from a strong triangle player. So those are players that stood out to me in addition to the ones that we had already mentioned.
Just want to give a quick shout out to Kentucky Chaos, the 23 seed in the U20 boys division, making it all the way to quarters where they lost 15-10 to Philadelphia, but really blowing away their seed, biggest seed breaker by far. Underseeded, obviously.
They ended up being like a combined Lexington Pie and Minnesota team or something. I feel like Kentucky Chaos does not effectively tell you much about who made up this team.
It was chaos, Keith.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. They told me right up front. It was chaos.
I also want to give a shout out to the Colorado teams in the boys division, who I thought really outperformed expectations. Cosmic out of Colorado Springs went 4-2. Actually got a win over that Kentucky team in consolation. Lost to Utah in the bracket 15-10. Honestly, not a bad result. They played solid. And the Denver team also breaking seed. So I like where Colorado Youth Ultimate is right now, coming up.
Definitely.
Played at home.
Happy to take the home cooking,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, time to turn our attention to the AUDL second round. We've got the divisional championship games coming up this weekend. 4 games on tap, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday. I'm looking very much forward to being at the New York DC game in New York. And Keith, where should we start? We got to break down each of these matchups.
Let's start with New York. It's what you want. It's the marquee matchup.
All right. So Keith, you've got the line at DC plus 1.5. Evan Lepler has the line at DC plus 3. So obviously you're a little bit more bullish perhaps on DC's chances. We've seen these teams go down to the wire many times before. Last year, buzzer beater from Jack Williams to Ben Yacht to win it on, literally at the fourth quarter buzzer, disc in the air. And that has been the biggest story between these two teams. DC has always played tough, and New York seems to win every single jump ball and every single end of quarter situation. And that is always just enough for them to get past DC. Can the Breeze flip the script?
So I think I would probably set this line really at a +2, but that's no fun for anybody. Nobody wants to push. And by the time it gets to the super contest, it's probably going to be like +2.5 with juice. So I actually made this line in part because of what I thought might be your sentiment coming into the show. I feel like you're high on DC's ability to upset New York. Obviously, New York's still going to be the favorite. They're playing at home. We just watched some of the core members of both of these teams go at it in the final, and we just spent a bunch of time talking about it. So we know that these two teams are well matched up against each other, and that a close game is probably the most likely outcome out of anything will be that it's close. But we haven't seen that work out for DC in the past, so I have trouble counting on that here. Like, we're at the point where it's like, I'm not going to believe it till I see it, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they've played twice this season. New York won 18-17 in DC back at the beginning of the year. And then in what was essentially locked up for New York time, they beat DC 21-18 in New York. Although that game was like decently close throughout most of it, and it ended up kind of New York pulled away just a little bit at the end to win by 3. If you give me DC +3, I'm probably going to hammer it. I mean, I feel like the game is likely to be close. DC's offense has looked better over the last month. They have been very impressive in the postseason. Of course, New York has been totally dominant this whole year. They passed the test of going out to Colorado and Salt Lake, coming away 2-0 in games where you think maybe they're finally going to take a loss. They're at altitude, back to back, all the travel, blah blah blah. This has just been one of the most special teams in a long time in the AUDL. Do I see this road coming to an end here at home in the second round of the playoffs? No, I don't. But I think this is the biggest challenge that they will face in the entire playoffs. I think if whoever wins this game is going to be the favorite at championship weekend. You can tell me all you want about how Salt Lake's offense is so amazing. Okay, whatever. The best team in the East is going to very likely win the championship. That's how I feel. So this to me in some ways feels like the de facto AUDL championship game. Now, maybe I'll change my tune after championship weekend, but I really think this is the one. DC has been the second best team in the league. And so here we go. I think the Breeze have shown that they have the capacity, but their offense has to just stay super clean. And they haven't quite been able to do that this season, but they've never looked better than they have the last month, especially once they added Jacques Nissen back to the lineup.
I need DC to win by like 5 or more for me to not fade them if they win. If they win this game, I'm taking the emotional letdown points the other way so easily. But yeah, I agree. Like we're both the same that I think this is going to be a close contest. I still favor New York. I think I'll take them to narrowly. I feel like I take them narrowly to cover 1.5 because they're at home. So I'll take New York
at 1.5. Yeah, it's a much tougher decision at 1.5 than it is at 3. I think I take New York -1.5, but it's really close. And I think the Breeze have a real chance to win the game. I do. I mean, we know what we're going to get, right? We're going to get 2 elite offenses and D-lines that have a lot of explosiveness after a turnover. Can either of the D-lines really force turnovers from the other team? I think whoever does that better is going to win the game.
All right, where to next?
Well, why don't we talk about let's stay on the East Coast and go down to Atlanta. Austin traveling to the Hustle's home stadium, where they will be 3.5-point underdogs, according to Keith. I am very high on Atlanta's chances to win this game. I think that Austin, while impressive in their win over Carolina at home, is going to run out of magic here against a superior Atlanta team that doesn't have to travel for this game. So I really like the Hustle's O-line. I think that their D-line is going to definitely do enough to cause some cough-ups from Austin. And 3.5 is, it's a lot.
They beat them by 4 in their only matchup.
Yeah, I hesitate. I feel like playoff games tend to be tight. I'd probably take Austin +3.5, but I do think Atlanta will win without much question. That makes sense.
Yeah, the 3.5 is definitely hard to pick that component. I do favor Atlanta somewhat comfortably here. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Brett Holzmeier is the best player on the field. But I kind of felt like Austin was on the outside looking in against Carolina too, and they surprised us. I think if they play that way again, we could be looking at a potential upset. I also felt like Austin was potentially the best wild card team, wild card dog, I should say. So I think that they were always going to have a shot against Atlanta. So I think I would take them to cover 3.5, even though I favor Atlanta. It feels a little weird to middle in this situation, but I think Austin's good. And Atlanta, not a ton of times being in this big spot. So I could see them hemming a little bit under the pressure.
Where are we going, Keith?
Well, let's go in the schedule and go to Salt Lake next. LA traveling to Salt Lake, and I'm making them 3.5 point dogs in this new reborn LA Aviators. You're not buying it. Charlie's shaking his head.
I'm shaking my head. I'm not buying it. Sure, they're playing a little better. I mean, the reason they're playing better is because they've added good players to their team.
Yes.
Calvin Brown is really good, and now he's playing, and now they're better. But they're not going to beat this Salt Lake team. They're just not. Their offense isn't that good. They won a slop fest game against a Colorado team that laid an egg. This Salt Lake team is not going to be slop fest. This is the best offense in the league. I will literally be shocked if LA wins this game. Shocked.
I mean, I was shocked that they beat Colorado. I thought Colorado was close.
I was too, but John Nethercutt wasn't playing. Like, how are you supposed to expect one of the best players to not show up for the playoff game? You know. But credit to LA. They've definitely played their best ultimate in the last 2-3 weeks. I just don't think that they're going to have what it takes to beat Salt Lake.
Yeah, I'm with you. We've been high on this Salt Lake team all year. I think me more than you. So I can't turn my back on that now, even with Calvin Brown and Kevin Tien and Marcel Osborne playing crazy. I don't know if that's just enough to convince me to go against a Salt Lake team that's just looked like they were fully focused on getting to a title game this season. So I'm still going to side with Salt Lake. Playing the number, though,
it's a little tougher, isn't it?
Now let me throw the fade back on. Yeah, I'm taking Salt Lake. I think they're gonna roll. I think they're gonna roll, Charlie.
I do too. I'm taking the home favorites with a big crowd. And I think the Shred pull away in this one, win by 6.
I gave Pavel Guff for making me look bad with by rope-a-doping me all season.
All right, we finally end up in the Central Division. Yuck. Indy at Minnesota. Somebody gets to go to championship weekend. Let's all hope it's Minnesota because we'll have better crowds. So, Keith, Indy has certainly been a step behind Minnesota. Do they have, though, enough firepower to knock off this Minnesota team? This Minnesota team has never made championship weekend. I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so.
I'm going back in my mind. They were supposed to make it that one year, and then they lost to Chicago. They choked it late. I don't think they've ever been there. It's been Madison and Chicago's division.
Yeah, but right now Minnesota's in the driver's seat. I wonder if Indy has the mentality to go into Minnesota and score a big upset win. I might feel differently if this were an Indy team that had proven that before, but I don't know. I'm not sure that I see that identity for this team coming into this game. Now, I think the ticket for Indy is they got to send it. They got to send it. They're an efficient hucking team. They don't necessarily huck a lot. They're one of the lower hucking teams, and maybe that's why they're efficient. Maybe if you add the volume, it's not going to work. But I think they need to increase variance. So send the disc. Let your D-line bomb it. Hope that high huck percentage, and they're the best huck percentage in the league. Hope that holds up in this game. And that feels a bit like a long shot. But it might be what's necessary, especially early on. Maybe that's how you come out. You come out firing. See if you can put Minnesota on the back foot, and then just hold off from there. Yeah, it's. I was so into this Indy team in the beginning of the year, but their stumbles have just given me too much to worry about.
They looked good against Chicago 2 weeks ago,
true.
though. They really did. And Minnesota, the offense for the wind chill has been just terrible the last few weeks. I think let me pull the stat up real quick. In their last 7 games, they're averaging almost 23 turnovers per game. That is not good. That's an area where Indy is a lot better. Now, you have the like home field effect there, so I don't want to overly read into that. I think Indy has a great chance to win this game. I find this game to be like on a neutral field, it would be close to a pick'em for me. I'm definitely taking Indy plus 3.5. I do think Minnesota wins because they're playing at home, but I think it's going to be a close game. Minnesota is going to have to step up big and play a lot better than they did at the end of the regular season if they want to win. And I think that they can. The games at the end of the regular season didn't really matter that much. This one obviously does. So I think they win, but it's not going to be a blowout.
I can't decide where to go on the numbers, but as rough as Minnesota's offense has looked, they've also had one of the better defenses in the whole league. They are one of the league's leaders in blocks, in break percentage. So I can't decide if I feel like that's going to lead to a more comfortable win against an Indy team that I could see being a little nervous if they get behind and they're playing on the road. But your argument about the way they played against Chicago is kind of convincing. I still have trouble organizing which of these is the most likely upset. 3.5 feels like a lot. I like Indy, but do I think they're just going to get shook? I kind of do, but I just don't think Minnesota's good enough to take advantage of it. So I'm going to say Indy covers. I don't feel good about this. This is if we were really betting, I would just avoid this altogether. I don't want any parts of this. But this gives us identical picks also, which assures that it will not be right.
Yeah, we both picked winners and the spreads exactly the same way. I mean, I've been all in on all of the home favorites with the bye winning this week since before the playoffs started. So nothing has changed for me. But I will say, I think that the dogs are alive in all of the matchups except Salt Lake, LA. I don't think LA's got a prayer, but everybody else could win. And, I think it's going to be tough for them to beat Atlanta, but I definitely think DC and Indy could win their matchups. Should be a fun weekend of playoff games.
I think that we are going to get an upset. I think one of these wildcard teams is going to win.
All right, here we go. It's time for our deep look mailbag question of the week. Keith, what do we have this week?
All right, well, we got some post US Open and YCC questions. And so here's one that we got from Mott in the Discord. Do you see any relationship between the poor recent performances of Sockeye and Riot and the lack of Disc Northwest participation in YCCs? There have been Seattle teams there, but Disc Northwest, rather famously, does not have a standing relationship that gets them into YCCs with USAU. So, do you think that has an effect on what we're seeing from their elite club programs?
No. I mean, Seven Hills, which is effectively the YCC arm of Seattle Youth Ultimate, had an amazing weekend in Denver. They won multiple divisions. Most of the teams that didn't win got to semis. They were fantastic. I mean, I think Seattle looked the best overall. If you took every city and you said which city did the best at YCCs, Seattle is the easy answer for number one. So I think the reason Riot and Sockeye haven't been playing well is because they're in between star tiers. I don't know. There's a couple things. One is there's a lot of good mixed teams in Seattle that are pulling talent away from the single gender teams. Number one. Number two, you're kind of in this time of flux where you have some top players who are, at the end of their careers or retiring. And the next tier of players that is now 20 years of age and younger, which includes this YCC cohort, has not aged up into, top level club play yet. But just give it time. Sockeye almost looks like a development team this year with how many young high school level players they have on the team. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, just like who are they supposed to get that would make them better? There's just not that many options right now. They're in between, top elite cohorts. So I think that Sockeye will be very good in 4 years. I don't know about Riot. There's they've lost a lot of players. I need to see that program sort of like get reinfused with youth, but I honestly expect the same kind of a thing, and they're probably going to be awesome in like 4 years.
Both teams seem like they're kind of like, okay, we need to reinvest in youth, and maybe it's because players are going to the mixed division, or they're just leaving altogether. How different would it be if Abby Hecko and Claire Trop were still playing in Seattle, right? Like that would make a big difference if they were on Riot. So I think part of it is people leaving the community as well. They're still clearly are creating talented players, right? We look at High School National Invite and YCC as examples of where those talented players are coming from. Look at the USA rosters when we play under 20 and under 24 competition. There are great stars coming up on both sides for Seattle. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's more likely that there's something going on in the background here than it is that there's not as much talent coming out of Seattle, and that's impacting their overall top level club teams. I also think that other communities have gotten stronger, and that's definitely a part of it too.
Oh, we got one more. Here it is. Given some chatter about how good Sam Little is for Pony, who is the most important player on each of the finalist teams at the U.S. Open in the club division? Not necessarily the best player, Keith, but the most important player to each roster.
Okay.
Let's each make our... you go first, and then I will go after you.
All right. Well, let's start in the women's division because this is the easy one for me.
Okay.
Well, at least this first person is... It's still got to be Claire Trop. Like
it is unquestionably Claire Trop.
Not hard. Fury as usual still is pretty hard. Is it crazy to say Dina already? Like, I think they need her two-way ability and her size. I think that they need that. Yeah, I mean they have Lisa Cooper and Lo Guerin. Shayla Harris like plays bigger than she is too, but I don't know. I feel like they need Dina's talents in a way that they don't necessarily in other positions. So I guess I'd say Dina, but it doesn't feel like this is a team that like is dependent on anybody.
No, they're not. I like to pick. I think it makes sense. It's hard for me to say. I'm going to say Opie Payne.
I thought about it.
Opie still a critical pillar player for them when you look at, clutch blocks, moving the offense. She had a really nice weekend, 7 goals, 7 assists, 2 blocks, only 4 turns. And she kind of offers a role that they don't necessarily have that many players who can just go out and get a crazy block. And Opie has always been amazing at that. So it is tough with Fury because it feels like you could pick one of like 10 different players and it would be a reasonable answer. They just are they don't play like strict OD. They kind of have a lot of players playing in a lot of different spots. But Opie still feels like a critical piece of them when they're going to win games.
I think they would be upset if this were an easy question for us. Like they'd feel like they were failing if this were an easy question for us.
All right,
mixed division.
I'll start here first, and I'll begin with BFG. I'm going to go Cheryl Sue. I think that, while she isn't necessarily the one getting the most goals and assists, she's still a critical piece in the backfield for them. And I think when she plays well, BFG wins. I think there are fewer teams that have a matchup for Sue that can really slow her down. Whereas, there are some male matching players who can cause problems for Tommy Lee or for Jason Yoon. But Sue, when they won the championship, right, she was probably their best player and arguably their most important player, although you could probably say Mario O'Brien was that player. Mario O'Brien's gone. And I think that Cheryl Sue kind of feels like she's the straw that stirs the drink when things are going right for their O-line.
I agree with you. I think in the end, I would pick Cheryl Sue too. Other players I would consider, Jeff Pape, who essentially does a lot of the same things. Like these are the two players I think are the engines of the BFG offense. I think that, in fact, they look a little over-dependent on them to make things happen, maybe because they don't have a ton of big athletes downfield. The other player I maybe could hear argument for is Connor Belfield. He's probably their best defender. He's their best chance at trying to cancel out some of the big athletes on the other side. But I still think I would land in the same place as you with Cheryl Sue.
Who are you taking for Amp?
I could hear the argument for Paul Owens. I think I still would land with Henry Yang after what I saw this weekend. He just provides a get out of jail free card too often for them.
Yeah, I'm with you there. You know, sometimes the best player on the team is also the most important, and this is one of those times. Okay, we move to the men's division. Truck stop. Keith, who you taking?
Oh man, this one's tough too. It's like I feel like you could remove some of the parts and they would find other ways to fill those roles. But I think to me it's got to be Malks or Box. Maybe you'll be able to construct a Jock Nissen argument. I think I would take Johnny Malks. Like maybe if he was gone, they could ask Nissen to be more aggressive, or they could put Rowan in that role. But I feel like when he's clicking, when he's hitting on the really hard throws that he likes to attempt, it just unlocks a new element of their offense. They have a great cutting core alongside Box. They obviously have good handlers too, so it's a tough one. But I think I'll go Malks, and maybe that's too much recency bias. I don't know.
I mean, I get it. I think he had 16 assists to lead the team this weekend. But I'm actually going to take Christian Boxley because I think that his elevated level of play has offered a new dimension to their offense that they haven't had even like last year, arguably. I know they were so good last year, but they felt like they were walking on a tightrope a lot of the time in 2022. And it kind of they like fell off the tightrope in the finals. And now it doesn't feel as much like that to me. It feels like a more sustainable level of offense. And yeah, Malks is a big part of that. But I think Boxley's ability to get open in the deep space, go one-on-one against awesome defenders, and still win, that is huge for them. They need somebody who can do that. And he's picking up the biggest matchups and still getting wins, which leaves guys like Aaron Bartlett able to go out there and get deep scores. So I just feel like if you remove him, if you take Malks off the line, they could put Rowan in the spot to make the tough throws, and Rowan would do fine. That's not to, they'd be a worse team, but they would still have throws. If you take Boxley off, I don't think they have a cutter to replace him.
It's reasonable. Very reasonable. All right.
We go to Pony.
Pony time.
It has to be Chris Kotcher. It has to be. Right now, it has to be. I know you're going to say Sam Little. I'll let you have it. Right now, Chris Kotcher is the reason that they kept possessions moving when things weren't working right and their O-line looked a little unsure of what they wanted to do. It'd be like, yikes, it's stall 6. And then Kotcher would be like, I got you. And it felt like that way all weekend. I thought he was a huge piece for them. Very, very important out there. And kind of like was a big driving force as to why they won this tournament.
Before there was Sam Little, there was Chris Kotcher. I know you want me to say Sam Little. I want to say Sam Little, but whenever I go to open my mouth, the words Chris Kotcher just come out too. It's just like he does it all. He plays great defense too after the turn. What I like about both of these players is that I feel like they play well next to other really good players. And that's what the team needs. They have a bunch of star players. You could take one of them away and they would still have other players who like really want the rock when it matters. But I feel like Chris Kotcher and Sam Little open up the floor. They make the game easier for everybody else, and that makes them like really valuable on a team that needs players like that who can be efficient and productive with or without the disc, on defense or offense, cutting or handling. They need those kinds of players to be able to put on the line to make everything else work. So they both fit that archetype to me. I just think Chris does it at a little bit higher level. So I'd take Kotcher too.
So those are your mailbag questions of the week. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Deep Look. For Keith Rayner, I am Charlie Eisenhood signing off until next week. We've got AUDL Playoffs coming up. We'll break it all down next week and get you ready for the Elite Select Challenge, where bids will be on the line. Pro Champs coming up right around the corner as well. We will talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.